Say, kids, what time is it?
It's kind of like watching TV, but, in your car.
Like the intern, Jay Stevens, in the studio this morning. It is the dark side of the stream.
Yeah, special edition.
Well, yeah, I guess. Joe didn't want to be involved in this one
Gosh,
because Joe, I don't think,
booty cat.
I think Joe took one hit and he didn't inhale.
Really?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Joe doesn't
How
drink.
could he be in radio back in the day and not
he just loves
drugs?
music, dude. I mean, he's just a music guy. But yeah, he never touched the stuff. Didn't really drink. Didn't really smoke. He just
today's Dark Side of the Stream is a Netflix show called
Have a Good Trip.
Have a Good Trip.
And before we get into this, we got to do the disclaimer, which is we're going to talk about some personal drug experiences, and we are in no way advocating the use of any kind of illicit drugs, whether that be legal or illegal in the state of Missouri. So do not sue us. We're not telling you to go out and get a sheet of acid and take it all just so you can experience this.
This documentary talks about stars and celebrities, their drug experiences,
and in some cases chefs,
and recreated it in a really funny way with awesome recreations.
The animation stuff is really cool when they tell the stories. And actually, the Anthony Bourdain story has the two guys from Workaholics in it that recreate.
Oh yeah, they have great actors playing the roles of these people.
Those reenactments were
very
hilarious.
funny stuff.
Well, do you want to do our stuff first, or do you want to do their stuff first, and then we'll get into
maybe
our
let's
stuff?
do a couple of we'll do some of the documentary, and then we'll talk about personal experiences after.
The thing I thought was very interesting one of the things about hallucinogens that I always talk about is that I have always seen the potential of hallucinogens, whether it's mushrooms and psilocybin or LSD, they are beneficial.
Which the country's coming around on that. A lot of states are starting to say it's cool.
And right out of the gate, a lot of the artists and musicians like Sting, for example, sells that point because he says that he used it for, if you have a goal in mind and you use it, you're going to get it. And he's like, of course, I mean, there's a story he talks about where he had just done, I think, peyote or something like that, or mescaline, and he was on his farm, and the guy was like, hey, you got to help me give birth to this cow's giving birth. And so he's like tripping his mind out and had to help his farmhand give birth to this cow. And then Anthony Bourdain goes into this whole thing about, every time you're on something, especially if you're in the real world, the most crazy experiences will happen to you.
And it's so true.
When you're on that stuff. And I have some definite experiences.
And everyone I know has a crazy story, like, I was tripping and
then this happened.
And it's like, that has never happened in life. And all of a sudden this is happening.
Now, there are certain people, especially on the West Coast, that do what is called microdosing. And that is the idea that you take a very minuscule amount of this stuff on a regular basis, like you would take an antidepressant or Tylenol or whatever. It doesn't necessarily get you high in the sense where you're like, oh my God, the carpet's changing on me, but it adds a level of cognitive ability or a mood altering. I think
guys in the jiu-jitsu world do it. They'll do microdosing and they'll fight. Yeah.
And it's supposed to add an extra level of clarity to what you do. Now, I wouldn't want to do it all the time. I think it's just like my dad always said, if you do something too much, it's eventually going to kill you. Whether it's, if you take a bunch of Tylenol all day, it's not good for you.
Yeah.
So whether that is
you can have a drink of vodka, or you can drink too much and die.
You know what's going to be the best.
There's limits of everything.
But yeah, I thought they do a good job in saying right out of the gate, hey, it's not necessarily for everyone. And you can see that when they go down the list of all the actors and people and comedians and stuff, where they're like, I did it 10 times. I did it 500 times. I did it once and I probably shouldn't have done it.
Right.
That's a really good thing to say to someone.
Mindsets,
is that you shouldn't go into this lightly. You shouldn't just be, and the thing that blows my mind, especially like kids, and I'm no saint either, but just some of these people like Sarah Silverman was like, he just gave us this paper and we took it. Like, you don't know this guy. You're at some coffee shop. Be fairly
responsible.
You're in some coffee shop in New York.
Be fairly responsible.
Like, dude, like there are certain things in certain people I definitely don't think should ever touch this stuff.
But I also, I don't think that, I think if you choose that road, use smart judgment. But I also think you should not be straight out the gate. There's no way I'm ever trying it. I think there's a really
there
happy
are going to
medium.
be people in this world
medium.
just like that. They won't eat broccoli. They're not going to do that.
Medium.
And that's fine. And if that's where they want to stop, that's where they stop. I would never push anyone to try something they didn't want to try. But again, we'll get into our personal stuff, but next on the dark side of the stream, we'll talk about some of the stories from some of these musicians and artists and actors and stuff. We're discussing Have a Good Trip, Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave.
Say, kids, what time is it?
It's kind of like watching TV, but, in your car.
Dark Side of the Stream, 104.7 The Cave. Mike the Intern, Jay Stevens, today discussing the Netflix documentary Have a Good Trip.
I like the way that they categorized it, where it was like they would tell a story about somebody's drug experience and it would be reenacted with awesome, funny actors. And then at the end, they would say, okay, so here's what we learned from this. One of the ones I thought was great because it's so true. Don't look in the mirror while you're tripping.
It's kind of like what we said earlier, like some people shouldn't do it. One thing I always say is like, if you feel like you've got a lot of demons, yes, you should not look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Because you're going to see, if you have a very bad self-image, that's going to definitely come to the forefront.
Which is like a whole nother level.
Yeah,
kind of
and Sting made the point. He goes, your morality is right in front of you, and you can't escape it when you're on this stuff. And when you're in the mirror looking at yourself, like that morality, it's kind of like having sex on this stuff. Like, so certain people. I had talked to one dude. He said one time this chick he was with just started to age right in front of him, like to where it was like the Indiana Jones, like all of a sudden to like
that's
skeleton.
Terrible.
That's terrifying.
That's
luckily
terrifying.
for me, I've never had that experience.
We might be telling these stories, and it will literally make people not want to do it.
And that's kind of that's actually what Sting said at the beginning. He's like, I don't want this to turn into like a just say no campaign, because he's like, I think these experiences are valuable for a growth as a person and your connection.
I think it's definitely
with the
valuable
world.
For growth and connection.
I agree
with
it 110%. Sure. Now, again, it's what you want to get in, what you put in, and what you get out, and all that stuff. And like the Anthony Bourdain story is like, Sting goes, if you want to get something out of it, you can get something out of it. If your goal is just to get messed up, you're going to get messed up.
Yeah.
And so his story was like they're in like high school or something. His buddy takes a driver permit. They have pot, they have hash, they have LSD, they have Quaaludes. They find these ex-strippers on the road hitchhiking. They take them back to a hotel room. They start doing a bunch of blow. They take acid. They're peaking hard. These strippers are like taking out their outfits. This chick was like, give me some Quaaludes. She just collapses straight on the floor. And they're like, oh my God, we killed her. And that happens on acid, dude.
Woo!
Oh, brother. Man. But again, look at all the lists of stuff they were on. Like their goal was to get screwed up.
You're running
definitely wouldn't suggest that at all.
Whole different thing than saying just eating a few mushrooms.
And locking yourself in the house or in your backyard and just trying to figure it out.
Tripping out with some candles and some buddies or something.
Yeah, you don't just dive into the Mississippi and think you can swim it. You got to train. You got to lean into
use responsible choices.
Yes. Disclaimer: we're not advocating drug use. One thing I wasn't, Carrie Fisher. The other thing about this documentary that I loved was that these were some of the last appearances by Anthony Bourdain on film and Carrie Fisher.
Yeah.
And Carrie Fisher always got a bad rap for being kind of a cokehead. Late 70s, early 80s. She's definitely been there, but I had no idea she was super into LSD too.
Yeah.
And they go around her house. It was like, I can imagine taking a couple hits acid and going into her house.
Great place to hang out.
Woo!
Yeah.
Princess Leia all day, dude. I wouldn't be able to stop.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to handle it. Like, I couldn't handle it. To hang out with Carrie Fisher, I don't know what I'd do. But yeah, it's a really cool documentary. Obviously you probably don't want to let your teenage kids watch it because it does, in the sense, romanticize some of these experiences.
Well, or have an open conversation. Kids are going to come across it in their teenage years.
That's true, and there's
no matter what you say.
Yeah, that's true too.
So maybe have an open conversation about it.
And maybe that's what this is about. It's just trying to open the conversation about it. But again, we've already got states in the greater 48 that have got mushrooms legal, or you can like literally walk into a store, buy them, and take them home.
So just like pot was outlawed, now pot is basically going to be soon probably federally legal.
Yep.
And mushrooms now, MDMA, they're talking about bringing that back, which is ecstasy. Yep. So there are good parts of these things.
There are benefits, I think, to certain things. And again,
in moderation, just like life.
Especially with the studies with like people that are terminal. And like, I keep going back to Sting, but the mortality thing is 100% right on the money. There are studies that show that people that are terminal that take MDMA or psilocybin and they are able to come to grips and understand what's happening,
and not be afraid,
and not and face it. And that's a powerful thing. I mean, you're talking about someone that knows that they've got a timer, and that, and really with any of us, because we all do. Some people know and some people don't. And I think that's another thing that really hit home on this. Another thing we want to mention, another lesson was don't drive on acid.
Well, yeah,
do not,
for sure.
Do not drive on acid.
Yes, for sure. God, right. Okay. Well, when are we getting into our stories?
Our stories. I guess we'll go. I guess we'll do Jay's personal drug stories. Our own have a good trip. Dark Side of the Stream next on 104.7 The Cave.
Hey kids, what time is it?
It's kind of like watching TV, but in your car.
Jay Stevens, Mike the Intern, back in the studio, Dark Side of the Stream, discussing Have a Good Trip, the documentary on Netflix. And now we kind of decided in the last two segments to do our own Have a Good Trip stories. So we're going to start with the man, the legend himself, Jay Stevens. Again, this is not a, hey, go try drugs. This is a disclaimer that we're not telling you to do this stuff. We're just sharing our own experiences, so do not sue us. Jay, please.
And we were all young once and out of control. And okay, I have a lot of interesting stories, but the two funny ones that stand out the most is the high school I went to in Hawaii. Above the high school was a huge cow pasture. And so if it rained, which it rained a lot in Hawaii, you could go when the sun was coming up and you could pick mushrooms, magic mushrooms. So we would do this quite often. We were up there and we were picking them while we were eating. While we were picking them, we were eating them. And so we start tripping while we're walking around, and this big cow, like, looks at us and just chases us. So we climb a tree, and this cow, we're sitting up in this tree. It seemed like forever, and this cow is just down there, just like hanging out. Who knows if he was really trying to kill us or not, but that was what we thought. Finally, we get down, and once again, don't drive when you're on these things. We're driving home, and I'm driving. All my buddies in the back of the truck. I'm driving my truck, and the yellow lines in the road were coming up over the hood and shooting over the car, and just focusing, just trying to get home. That was, and then, okay, other funny story number 2, and then I'll be done. We used to go out to this beach in Hawaii, and it was like a private, secluded. You had to walk in for miles to get there. So we'd go out there, and everybody would take acid. This is a high school thing to do. We'd bring little red flashlights and stuff and just trip out, and there was like a little pond and things. Well, I was standing by the fire, and I was already having a bad trip. I was seeing skulls in the sand everywhere and feeling like something slicing my scalp. It was weird. But I was trying to shake it off, and I'm standing by this fire. All of a sudden, I feel a sting on my back. And I reach back, and I just feel raw meat. And I'm like, oh my God, I got shot. I thought I got shot because I'm feeling raw meat. And my buddies all by the campfire were laughing. They were grilling some meat, and one of them whipped a piece of meat, and it hit my back, and it stung. But when I reached back there, it was stuck to me, and I felt raw meat. I thought I was shot. Okay, there you go.
That's great friends. All right. Well, again, don't do drugs. We're going to talk about my experiences. Just a few. Next, Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave.
What time is it?
It's kind of like watching TV, but in your car.
Mike the Intern, Jay Stevens in the studio. It's Dark Side of the Stream discussing Have a Good Trip, the documentary on Netflix. We've, again, disclaimer, don't do drugs. And if you do, be responsible. Don't be an idiot. And I think the documentary does a really good job of
it's
showing that the potential that some hallucinogens have.
It tells the stories of these celebrities, and it's kind of like, make your own judgment if you think this would have been cool if it was you or not. Like the scenario that you're in, because it's some crazy scenarios you just happen to end up in sometimes, man.
And they definitely do happen. I was under the impression early on in life that I wanted to get this stuff out of my system. I know myself very well. And so I felt like if I could get it out of my system early, then later in life, when I was having to be adult, then I wouldn't have to worry about all this stuff creeping up on me. So
fair.
Which kind of worked for and against me. I'm not saying that that's a good thing or a good standpoint to have, but it is the one I did, and that's just the life I've led. So I'll tell you two different stories, and I've got plenty. Jay and I both could literally do probably several months of this show where we just talk about our awful drug experiences. We're not going to do that. We're just going to do this one, and hopefully we don't get sued. My first experience when I was in high school, I was in drumline. And one night, the night before we have a it was a marching band competition. It was full marching band competition in, I believe, Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, outside of Tulsa. One of the guys one of my best friends, who was in drumline with me, a girl, I believe he was seeing, or maybe it was like a friend of hers, and then my girlfriend at the time. The four of us decided to drop acid in high school. And the night before this happens, we had a really good time up until about 3 or 4 in the morning, when it started to become clear to us that we were not going to be able to go to sleep and that we had to be at the high school with our gear within like 2 hours. Okay.
Yes.
So at that point, the girls, because they didn't have to go, they went home. Right. And then my buddy came to my house because it was like, we got to stick together, man. We got to stick together.
Oh my gosh.
Guess who could not find his band uniform?
Of course.
Me. I can't find it anywhere. So not only am I an LSD, I hadn't slept at all. I have to show up to the high school under the influence of LSD, go up to the band director and ask to borrow band uniform because I can't find mine. And somehow, by the grace of God, he didn't know what was going on. I squeaked by that. And then we proceeded to get on a bus, still under the influence, go to Oklahoma, march a competition in the sun. It was so hot that day. I'll never forget because I remember feeling like when we finally got back on the bus after that whole experience was over, I collapsed like on the floor of the bus and passed out all the way back to Springfield. And I was just like, never again. But the funny thing about that story is we actually medaled at that. We placed at that competition. I guess I don't remember how well we did, but I know we placed because they took a picture of the whole band and they had that picture in the case outside the band room for a long time. Man. And if you looked at me, I looked very bad, but my buddy looked like he was dead, completely white. I mean, just the look on our faces, we're just like none. I mean, we marched competition under it was awful. Okay, the other story, the year 2000. Remember the Y2K BS?
Yes.
Everywhere the world's getting in.
Yes.
So me and my friends were like, you know what we should do? Get a hotel room, have a party. So we invite a bunch of people to I guess it was a Residence Inn at the time, but it's not. I don't know if it is anymore. That big Residence Inn hotel by the mall. We get a room somehow. And we have kind of a party. There was probably about 10 to 20 people in this room, all underage, whatever. 4 of us got the bright idea, hey, let's drop acid and not tell anyone. So that's what we did. So everyone's drinking, partying. Everyone starts to kind of split. The people that are in the 4 of us group were kind of like, this is getting a little too heavy for us. And then all of a sudden, the security guy that works there shows up. And we're all like, oh. He comes in and goes, hey, I'm not trying to squash your party down. I'm just here to tell you, keep it down. The owners are on the property. I've got to do my job. But if you keep it down, I don't have to bother you. No big deal. And we're like, hell yeah, security guy, awesome. He proceeds to stay in the room and drink with a bunch of high school kids. So here's the thing. The 4 people under the influence of LSD could see that this was a bad deal. We all knew this isn't good. This guy who's in his, we were all late teens, who's in his 30s, 40s, maybe 50s, is partying with a bunch of minors. This isn't a good thing. We need to get the hell out of here. So the 4 of us got in a car and went out to the country and spent the next several hours out in the country by ourselves. Had a great time. I think we went into like a Dylan, rest in peace, Dylan. I love that story. Went to a Dylan's, got a bunch of fruit and just went out and watched the end of the world out in the middle of nowhere. Obviously the world didn't end. So we go back to the hotel room. It's like 1 or 2 in the morning. And we had just missed what ended up happening when a bunch of high school kids party with the security guy. We walk in there. 3 of the guys had just run out of the room. And we're like, what the hell's going on? One of the guys is laying on the ground like he just got punched in the face. Well, what happened was security guy stays in the room, gets drunk with all the high school kids, eventually realizes, oh my God, I'm going to get trouble. The owner's here, leaves. The owner finds him, sees him drunk, smells him, fires him on the spot. Guess what he does? He doesn't leave. He goes back to the room with all the kids partying and continues to party with us. I wasn't there again. I'd left. And then I guess someone had made a joke about him or something. I don't remember how it started, but the guy just flipped on this dude, jumped on our buddy, and then which was a huge mistake because the guys in that room were going to kill this guy, and that's what they did. They went and chased the security guy off, beat his ass.
Wow.
We got back there just in time. Moral of the story here is the 4 people under the influence of LSD could see
the writing
what
on the
was
wall.
wrong when
Yeah.
all the people that were drinking could not see what was wrong. Again, the disclaimer here is people don't do drugs. And if you do them responsibly. Don't be an idiot. Don't drive. Stay in your house. Again, don't do drugs. And please don't sue us. It's Dark Side of the Stream. I hope we still have a job after this with 104.7 The Cave.